My generation, although reasonably well schooled, is probably the worst educated of this age.
Before Prince Philip would catch the eye of Queen-in-Waiting Princess Elizabeth, later marrying his distant cousin in 1947, before Prince Philip would be publicly accused of instigating the car crash that would claim the life of his daughter-in-law, Princess Diana.
You believe there was a conspiracy to kill Dodi?
They been murdered.
Before Prince Philip would lose his life after complications arose from his recent successful heart surgery in March of 2021. After 70 years spent in the public eye, Prince Philip was the longest serving royal consort in British history. And while his adult life was one chock full of privilege, his childhood was anything but. In fact, it was marked by tragedy and loneliness. As a member of both Greek and Danish royalty, Philip and his family were banished from their native country while he was still only a toddler. And Philip subsequently moved from one European nation to another in the search of a home. He would finally find one in the arms of his distant cousin Queen Elizabeth II before her ascension to the British throne in 1952.
And we see now for a moment His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. In his place in the procession, his midshipman page waits behind him.
A naval officer and a man known for his mischievous sense of humor, Philip remained by Elizabeth's side for over 60 years until his recent passing, which fittingly enough would see the Queen by his side to the very end. It was poppin', guys, your boy Marlon Palmer here with a new episode in our tribute series Before They Are Gone. With Prince Philip's recent passing due to complications from surgery, I thought we'd take a moment to look back at the man's accomplished life to get a sense of just how much he meant to not only the country of the United Kingdom, but to the woman he loved for over 60 years. Be sure to let me know what you thought of this story in the comments down below. Pass along some of your favorite memories of Prince Philip while you're at it. Prince Philip was born on the Greek island of Corfu on June 10, 1921 to Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, as well as Princess Alice of Battenberg. At the time of his birth, Philip was sixth in line to the Greek throne. So much like his future wife, Queen Elizabeth, Philip grew up the child of royalty. But that's pretty much where their similarities end, because Philip's childhood was much rougher. For instance, in 1922, his uncle, King Constantine of Greece, was forced to abdicate the throne after the debacle that was the Greco-Turkish War. Philip's own father, who had been working in the army at the time, was accused of treason and exiled. The family would flee to Paris, which would serve as their home base for the next decade, but making a living there wasn't much easier. His parents struggled to provide their family in hiding, and so Philip saw very little of them during this very nomadic years. Worse yet, his mother's nerves had become so wrecked by the family's forced exile that the children are often sent off to friends and relatives to be cared for. Then in 1931, when Philip and his sisters returned home from school one day, their mother was missing. Princess Alice had suffered a nervous breakdown and was sent off to a sanatorium in Switzerland, where she would later be diagnosed with schizophrenia.
And check in to an experimental psychiatric clinic near Berlin, run by the pioneering Dr. Ernst Simmel.
Eventually, his four older sisters would marry German aristocrats, move to that country, and leave 10-year-old Philip alone with his father in the south of France. At that point, Philip was more or less on his own and had no real family to call his own. Years later, when asked by The Independent what language he spoke at home, he responded, "What do you mean, at home?" With no home life to speak of, Princess Alice's family finally stepped up to the plate. Alice had been the great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria and the oldest daughter of Louis Mountbatten, the first Marquess of Milford Haven, which meant that her family had ties to the British family along with other royal houses throughout Europe. Taken under the care of his aunts and uncles, Philip began to attend school in England, eventually attending the boarding school known as Gordonstone in Scotland. But while attending classes there, Philip would experience yet another set of tragedies. When he was 16, his sister Cecile and her entire family were killed in a plane crash. Then only a few months later, his uncle and guardian, George Mountbatten, died suddenly of cancer at the age of 46. When Philip finished his education, he joined the Royal Navy and enrolled at the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, England, which is where the now 18-year-old would meet his third cousin, 13-year-old Princess Elizabeth, while her parents were being given a tour of the campus. It already is getting weird. The princess was reportedly immediately smitten by Philip, and the two began to exchange letters back and forth. 7 years later, they announced their engagement in 1947. In 2021, he's cancelled. That wouldn't happen.
The whole capital reflected the nationwide joy at the engagement of Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten RN.
But what should have been the happiest time of Philip's life was marred by all that he was missing. His father had passed away in 1944, and while his mother eventually left the hospital, she returned to Greece where she would shelter Jewish refugees during the Second World War. That meant that when his wedding day finally arrived, Philip's family wasn't there to support him at Westminster Abbey. Though originally planned to be something of a low-key affair, the royal wedding would take place in front of 2,500 guests and, in a sign of things to come, capture the imagination of an entire world starved by the recent atrocities of war for happiness and romance. To prepare for his wedding, Philip had to abandon his Greek and Danish royal titles and take the surname of Mountbatten from his mother's family. He also adopted Anglicanism as a religion. On the day he was married, he officially became the Duke of Edinburgh, Earl of Merioneth, and Baron of Greenwich. From that point forward, there were much happier times ahead for Philip. He and Elizabeth would quickly build a family, having 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. After an extremely successful career in the Navy that would see him become the first lieutenant of the HMS Wallace in 1942, 10 years later, Philip would be promoted to the rank of commander. But his naval career would come to an end soon after due to the death of his father-in-law, King George VI.
The passing of King George VI came as a sudden and most grievous shock to his people all over the world and to all friends of the British Empire and Commonwealth.
The king died on February 6, 1952, leaving Elizabeth as his heir. After her ascension to the throne, Philip would remain her consort for over 6 decades, accompanying her on official duties and appearances throughout the world. Over the years of her reign, Philip helped participate in the work of countless charitable organizations, particularly those that favored focusing on the environment, athletics, and education. He launched the Duke of Edinburgh's Award in the mid-1950s to focus on the accomplishments of young people. All of that isn't to say that his adult life went swimmingly. There has been more than one occasion when Philip's personal relationships will find him at conflict with others. Like in 1981, when he pressured his son Charles to either marry Lady Diana or walk away from her altogether. Years later, after Diana tragically passed away as a result of a car accident in 1997, Mohammed Al-Fayed would publicly accuse Philip of being a racist who helped orchestrate the car crash that would claim the life of Mohammed's son, Dodi Fayed, along with the treasured princess.
Only MI6 have done it by themselves. They have also used the American intelligence to spy on Dodi and Diana.
An official inquest was called to investigate the allegations, but no evidence of a conspiracy was ever found, and the crash was ruled an accident. Then in 2011, to mark his 90th birthday, Elizabeth bestowed upon her boo the office of Lord High Admiral, which is the titular head of the Royal Navy and a brand new title to add to his already lengthy list of accolades. In more recent years, Philip's advanced age began to catch up with him. Having already dealt with the previous ailments like a blocked coronary artery and a bladder infection, Philip underwent exploratory abdominal surgery in 2013. He would be released after spending more than a week in the hospital and make a complete recovery. A few years later, in May of 2017, he officially retired from public engagements at the age of 95. 1 month later, he was hospitalized again, this time with an infection. He'd bounced back from that too, but in April of 2018, he needed hip replacement surgery. Finally, in February of 2021, Prince Philip was admitted to a London hospital as a precautionary measure due to his feeling unwell. 2 weeks later, he was transferred to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where he underwent successful surgery for a heart condition. He was released from hospital later in March. But it wouldn't be long until complications arose and Prince Philip passed away peacefully in his sleep, his wife and queen of so many years sitting directly beside him. By the end of his long life, Prince Philip had lived a pretty remarkable existence, one that will be remembered for years to come by the British people he so faithfully served. So in honor of a life well lived, be sure to leave some thoughts for the man and his legacy in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in our next video.